It's Revelation.
Are you implying here some kind of conspiracy?
Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode. It is October 8th, Tuesday. Welcome to the podcast. So, the Democrats are getting nervous, and the mainstream media propaganda increases, and so do the frequency of hurricanes. Is there any connection? We're going to get into this news and more coming up right now. All right, first up, from the National Review, Kamala Harris doesn't even know her own stump speech. So if you didn't see last week, during one of her campaign rallies, Kamala Harris, her teleprompter went out and she couldn't go any further, so she got stuck. Basically what she said was what the National Review says, last Friday, Harris rolled her traveling circus act to Flint, Michigan to deliver her canned stump speech in a state she's fighting desperately to win. There, the Harris campaign discovered that things can go comically wrong for their candidate. As a speaker, even at a tightly scripted rally, the mere second that Harris no longer had a prearranged script to follow carefully, she's an utter loss for words. She was at literal loss for words. And she goes on to say, remember this number, 32. Today we got 32 days until the election. What happens next is authentically difficult to watch, the National Review says. It is while Harris is glancing away that the teleprompter breaks down, and the panic bewilderment on her face that she's turned back to find it blank must be seen to be properly appreciated. Indeed, that was the case. Zero Hedge also reports, watch Kamala Harris malfunctions during 60-minute ambush over border firearms nomination. And Tyler Durden, the supposed author at Zero Hedge, with the election only 28 days away, Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential candidate, and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, sat down for an interview with CBS. 60 Minutes. Oh, they did it jointly. I wasn't really aware of that. And so during the interview, if you didn't see it, I suggest you check it out. It's no different than any of the other interviews that she conducts. She doesn't really speak well at all. She talks kind of in circles. So she's asked about whether, because she spoke, I believe during a rally, I forget where she mentioned it first. Maybe it was another interview. Oh, it was during the debate. Was it during the debate where she said she had a gun? And my pointed question was somebody should have asked her what kind of gun she has. So that's one of the questions that was asked of her at 60 Minutes. And she said, I have a Glock. I've had it for quite some time. The vice president told CBS News correspondent Bill Whitaker during the interview when she was asked what type of gun she owned. My background is in law enforcement. When she asked if she ever fired it, Harris replied, of course, at a shooting range. Whether she's a good shot or not, who knows? I don't think she spends much time at the shooting range necessarily. She's got armed security. But it's going to be quite a problem if they manage to steal the election again and hand it to this buffoon. All right, the Federalist says Kamala Harris is poised to revive the worst aspects of FDR's socialist agenda. The Economic Club of Pittsburgh, Democrat presidential candidate Kamala Harris recently said she would engage in what Franklin Roosevelt called the bold, persistent experimentation, as he had told the 1932 graduating class of Oglethorpe University. But she did not mention FDR's vision of remaking the world, which included fundamentally changing our popular economic thought to see to a wiser, more equitable distribution of national income. Disturbing. But what is really disturbing is if you equate the Green New Deal or the New Deal, the New Deal is something that I equate to it, which is another article from the National Review, which is remembering a red terror. And the lead goes on to say, on Mao's Cultural Revolution, Hurricanes and Politics, the pronouns thing, Latinx, Steve Curry, and more. So the author goes on to say, if you don't know who this person is, Song Binbin, poster woman for Mao's bloody upheaval, dies at 77. That is the heading over obituary in the New York Times by Trip Gabriel. What was the bloody upheaval? The Cultural Revolution, which lasted from 1966 until Mao's death in 1976. While Song Binbin's a poster woman, in a famous photo, she's placed an armband on Mao's sleeves, an armband of the Red Guard. This was during a ceremony in Tiananmen Square on August 18, 1966, approximately 2 weeks before Song Binbin had participated in an important event, and an event was an opening act of the whole blood-soaked period. The story goes on to say, she was one of the high school students who beat her principal to death on stage, mind you. And this was also recently shown again in part of I think it was an online miniseries. On August 5th, 1966, students attacked Biang Zongjing, a 50-year-old mother of four who headed the school. She was kicked out and beaten with sticks and spikes and nails. After passing out, she was thrown onto a garbage cart and left to die. Later, Song Binbin went to America, where she earned a degree at the Boston University and MIT. Subsequently, she returned to China and said that she apologized for what she did. My point being is that we're sort of in a cultural revolution ourselves. And if Kamala Harris is elected, it is going to be accelerated to promote the agenda of globalism. So we'll have to learn a little bit more about that. So what are the Democrats preparing for? The Post-Millennial reports Morning Joe claims Trump and his family are preparing for civil war. This is an increasingly desperate person, an increasingly desperate family who are preparing for civil war. They just are. My point behind showing Joe Scarborough, and this is what my brother watches also on television, practically one of the only things he watches, is this is why he's so discouraged and he's worried about civil war, is Morning Joe is really in the trifecta of propaganda. The people that don't watch Joy Reid watch Morning Joe. And the people that don't watch those two watch like Rachel Maddow or some of the other MSNBC shows. I want to move on now to the Los Angeles Times. Election denial returns as focus with Vance's non-answer and new Trump indictment details. Now, before I go into the text of this article, because what we do here is read the news, is remind you of what happened during the vice presidential debate. And this is where it's going, where they went to January 6th. Now, going to the text of the article, Walz called the attack a threat to our democracy and one driven by Trump's refusal to admit defeat. He is still saying he did not lose the election, Walz said to Vance. I would just ask you that. Did he lose the 2020 election? Vance unwilling to buck Trump's false claims, again, mind you, that the election was stolen and he was focused on the future. That, Walz said, is a damning non-answer. The answer is that the election was stolen. The whole thing between Stop the Steal rally was to pause the certification so there would be an in-depth review of the unprecedented mail-in ballots. Now, why Rudy Giuliani and all these other people went into voting machines and all these other things, I'm not saying that's not a vector for cheating or fraud. It is. However, the mail-in ballots that were instituted during the pandemic that in a lot of states were not put forth by the legislature, that indeed was your avenue to claim fraud, because that was a violation of the Constitution and how elections are to be conducted. What is happening now, which is good, is the red states are purging voter rolls, which is helping, but there needs to be a policing of mail-in, really mail-out ballots. And we should return to absentee balloting as it was before the pandemic. The reason we never had mail-in ballots or mail-out ballots before the pandemic is because it opens a door for fraud. And that's indeed what we see in all the blue states. So whatever the Los Angeles Times or Tim Walz says about fraud is true. Did they cheat? Did the Democrats cheat? It was actually a coup. On the 2020 election, they did, and nobody called them out. And the fact that people are afraid of even talking about it, the reality is that it's more than likely fraud occurred. So, and the problem is there's no chain of custody to police. You mail out the ballots come in, whether they're through drop boxes or through mail trucks or whatever. They're just counting ballots, which are no chain. The ballot has to have a chain of custody. That's why you need to go into the polling place. They have the ballots. You go there, you fill it out, you put it in the box, you leave. Then the registrars of voters and the poll workers and such, have to maintain a strict chain of custody of those ballots. If you're mailing ballots all over the United States, it doesn't friggin' matter. All right, moving on. Fox News battleground state under fire for scheduling voter registration site to go dark same day as Butler rally. Now, this is from MSN, where they put, this is an opinion by Emma Colton, which I'm not going to read right now. I'm not going to go into the text because many of you might know what's going on here. Is Fox News is stating the obvious, which is that during Trump's Butler rally, someone got a hold of Elon Musk's text, because Elon Musk went out to say, vote, 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 fight, 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 vote, 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 register to vote. He went through this whole thing about registering to vote and how important it was. The very day that happened in Pennsylvania, right, they took the voter registration site down for maintenance. Can anybody explain that? You couldn't have done that last year. So indeed, there is a conspiracy there. Moving on in the headlines, Mediaite. Donald Trump concludes his commemoration of October 7th terrorist attack by playing YMCA by the Village People. Now, Donald Trump concludes all his rallies by playing YMCA. Why this is any different, it doesn't make a difference. It's just a Mediaite trying to mock him and say, oh, you know, he's playing this frivolous song, and they're trying to score points with the Jewish community and saying that was insensitive to do. I don't think it necessarily was. Daily Mail is reporting Elon Musk tells Tucker Carlson he's fucked if Trump loses election. How long do you think my prison sentence was going to be? And there, he had to sit down with Elon Musk there. Tucker Carlson did. And which is true because they want to put him in jail in Brazil. They want to put him in jail in Europe because he's providing a platform for free speech. Reuters, election officials who back Trump's big lie stir concern in swing states. Why this is important? Well, this is the mainstream news saying that Trump's big lie was the fact that he said that he didn't lose the 2020 election, which he didn't. And if Democrats were so confident that he did lose the 2020 election, they would get rid of mail-in ballots. So the election officials who believe that Trump actually won the 2020 election are now going through the voter rolls, and they're purging them of people that can't be substantiated. Now, I went over this yesterday and Sunday morning, had a piece, and they played it. They were trying to say, oh, well, the Georgia election board, they disqualified these people from the voter rolls. They were students at Savannah State University, a historically black college, but they have international students there, and they do have Hispanic students there that some of which could certainly be illegal or non-citizen. The Federalist is reporting Nevada's failed mass mail-in ballot experiment should have been a case study, not a blueprint. The Federalist goes on to say, you would think that with all the new technology nowadays, voting in the election process would be reliable and effective. That is not the case in Nevada, where it took a lawsuit to force a Clark County election official to clean up the voter rolls. What should have been a one-time failed experiment of automatically mail in a ballot at every active registered voter in 2020 is now the norm. The automatic mass mailing of ballots sounds nice. The reality is that it sent ballots to strip clubs, casinos, and bars, not residences. The Public Interest Legal Foundation, of which I am a president, the author says, photographed hundreds of commercial addresses listed as residences on the Nevada voter roll. Some of these addresses included Sony Drive-In, the Las Vegas Airport, a 7-Eleven gas station, vacant lots, Binion's Casino, and a Larry Flint Hustler Club. Well, this is the reason they're taking off the voter rolls, is because it's obvious to see that there's some cheating going on. Federalist also reports that the federal government is fighting to keep non-citizens on voter rolls, as I just expressed in that Reuters article, is that they're saying election officials who believe in Trump's big lie. The Federalist goes on to say, will states be allowed to remove non-citizens en masse from the voter rolls during the home stretch of the 2024 election? If Biden-Harris administration gets their way, the answer is likely no. The story goes on to say on September 9th, the Department of Justice issued guidance seemingly threatening legal action against governmental authorities and election integrity watchdogs who might work with them to clean up voter rolls. They should endeavor to do so within 90 days of the election day. The Biden administration DOJ claims that such actions would violate the so-called quiet period provision of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. Now the DOJ has made the good on that threat, filing a lawsuit against the state of Alabama that could have national consequences. An issue is an effort initiated by Alabama Secretary of State Wes Allen on August 13th, some 84 days from the election in 2024, to activate and seek to remove non-Americans from a population of 3,251 individuals registered to vote in that state but who have been issued non-citizen identification numbers by the Department of Homeland Security. So there it is. There are people that are provenly not citizens that are removed from the voter rolls. Whether it's the quiet period or not the quiet period, they have no right to be voting in national elections. And like I've often said, is that there is no process of denying people, non-citizens that are registered to vote in municipal, maybe legally in municipal or state elections, but illegally in federal elections. There's no mechanisms to filter those people out. Okay. Little technical difficulty today. Washington Post, local Republicans decry hurricane falsehoods as Trump spreads them. Did I get text from this? No. And the New York Post is reporting Hurricane Helene. I just need to go back to this article for a second from the Washington Post. And it is the Washington Post, so they didn't decry hurricane falsehoods. So there are a lot of things that people are reporting and which are all true. All right, first when the federal response started happening, they wanted for some reason, the feds wanted all the local response to stop once they got there. So they tried to ground helicopters so they could fly in their helicopters. But now there are reports of federal helicopters rotor washing local aid sites, the citizen aid that was going on there. It seemed like they were being harassed by federal helicopters. I don't know what's going on there. But in any case, the reality is, and they talked a lot about funds going to Lebanon before they approved funds to go to North Carolina. So it seems, and among other things, and it seems they're slow walking the response purposefully. So are they creating storms? But they're certainly exacerbating the damage done there by slow walking the federal response. And the local Republicans are trying not to do that because they want the federal aid, so they're trying not to diss the federal government or the Biden administration. So they didn't name Trump by name or whoever made these accounts, but because they want the aid. So they're walking a fine line, but the Washington Post makes it sound like, there's always a rift, and we're going to get to that in a minute. There's always a rift in the Republican Party, which there really isn't. I mean, people have needs from the federal government, and so you don't want to piss off the federal government when you need something from them. So the New York Post is reporting Hurricane Helene reveals rudderless White House and an inept Harris flaw. They go on to say substantially, politically, and personally, both Biden and Harris have had ample reason to step up on the aftermath of the storm's horrific destruction, yet the administration has repeatedly failed Helene's victims and, by extension, the American people as a whole. The storm made landfall on the 26th of September in Florida, and then raged over parts of Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia, killing over 200 people so far. But the administration's slow response in mobilizing federal resources hampered recovery efforts, while Biden's and Harris's late and perfunctory visits to the disaster area show support have made them woefully insensitive. Biden, who was vacationing in Delaware when the storm hit, glibly told reporters he had commanded the federal response by phone for at least 2 hours. Even more alarming, Harris, who was hoping to be the next president, was initially content with a brief FEMA photo op in the storm's aftermath, only when it became a media talking point. Nearly a week later, did the Veep finally travel to hard-hit part of the swing state, Georgia, but not North Carolina, which is the most important. Now, as we get into this, we want to move over to what is widely reported, and a lot of you might have seen it, from Real Clear Politics. White House snaps at Fox News reporter over hurricane relief. The whole premise of your question is misinformation. And Peter Ducey's original question was on the issue of funding. The administration had as money to send to Lebanon without Congress coming back, but Congress does not have to come back to approve money to send to people in North Carolina. Do I have that right? And then Karine Jean-Pierre later goes, wait, no, it is. Your whole premise of your question is misinformation. Sir, yes, it is. And what I was trying to say here initially was that misinformation is not something reporters engage in during questioning, unless she's trying to insinuate that he is engaged in propaganda during his questioning. He didn't say that at all. He said President Biden is fond of saying, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value. If he has money for the people in Lebanon right now without Congress having to come back, what does that say about his values? There's not enough money right now for the people in North Carolina who need it. That's not misinformation. Indeed, it's not. And that's the problem right there. So she's trying to insinuate that Peter Ducey is engaged in propaganda. That's an intelligence thing. Misinformation is, Peter Ducey is not misinformed, and he's not spreading misinformation. That's not how that's working. What he's doing is talking about what are their priorities. And he's trying to say, it seems like your priorities are the people of Lebanon, not the people of North Carolina. Like I said, they seem to be slow walking the response on purpose. Why would that purpose be? It's to, again, interfere with the election. Now, did they create the storm? Well, the Daily Beast says Marjorie Taylor Greene is now adding lasers to her Hurricane Helene conspiracy. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene appeared to double down on her Hurricane Helene conspiracy theory over the weekend, following up a baseless claim that they control the weather with an assertion that such a scheme might involve lasers. The Georgia congressman, who has a history of blaming deadly disasters on laser-based plots, posted to X a clip from a 2013 CBS News broadcast video. Here it is. About experimental efforts to participate rain and lightning using lasers. CBS 9 years ago talked about lasers controlling the weather. Greene wrote, apparently mistaking the year of broadcast based on text added to the clip. We all saw the clip. We all saw the scientists there talking about what's possible. We know what's possible. I explained it the other day. You can steer atmospheric rivers, so you can control the jet stream and the way storms and other weather phenomenon move. You can also cloud seed using lasers and apparently steer jet streams and atmospheric rivers by heating them up with plasma beams, lasers, and so forth and so on. This is not difficult to understand. Right, the Free Press is reporting Elon succeeded where FEMA failed. The Starlink CEO was racing to help the victims of Hurricane Helene. With a handful of receivers on hand, Robbie Starbuck raced to the scene, and then he contacted Elon Musk on X and said, can you help? And they did. So Elon Musk and the citizens of North Carolina, among others, are racing to help people affected by Hurricane Helene, while the federal government is slow walking the response. You know, it was 10 days already before they started seeing, mind you, federal helicopters are apparently black SUVs flashing blue lights that aren't helping, but are just visible. So the FEMA director the other day said, oh, just because you don't see us doesn't mean we're not there. which is a bunch of bullshit. PJ Media is reporting there's no Republican identity crisis. There's just a dwindling number of Trump-hating squishes, which there's a lot to say about this as well, which is, as I mentioned before, they're always, the Democrats and the mainstream media are trying to say that there's infighting within the Republican Party. There isn't. There's fighting between populist nationalists, populism, and elitism, and the establishment, which is rhino Republicans, establishment Republicans. You know, you see the establishment banding together around one of the worst presidential candidates in history, Kamala Harris, to defeat populism. Because what the elites don't like are populists, are the population, the people who are supposed to be running this country, not the elites, right? The elites are people, yes, but everybody that's concerned about democracy, you're concerned about a majority having a stake. Majority of the citizens of the United States having a stake in how they're governed, right? Isn't that democracy? Instead, you have all these progressives and leftists siding with the elites who don't care for you. They go on to say a few things drip more insincerely than overwrought lamentations on the mainstream media about the future of the Republican Party. Even dissidents of global media bubble would love nothing better than to see the GOP disappear from the face of the earth overnight. Faux concern for the fate and the state of the grand old party predates Donald Trump's rise to the top of it. However, yet just another emotional thing has intensified in the Trump era. Before we get into a couple of recent examples, remind everyone, blah, blah, blah. Two prominent Beltway Democrats could literally be at each other's throats, and the New York Times wouldn't have anything to say about it. However, if two Republicans go to lunch in Washington and order two different things, the headline screams Republican Civil War. There is a change going on in the Republican Party. It is, in fact, it's like a changing of the polls. The Democrats have become the party of the elite, and the Republicans have become the party of the working class. There's been a shift. So the Republicans are becoming anti-corporatism, which is good. And the Democrats have become the party of corporatism, which is weird because they say they support unions, but how can you support corporations on one hand and unions on another? That's just the dialectic. They like to control both. And, you know, people think that the Democrats still have people's best interests, especially middle-class people. That's just false. More from Fox News. Whoopi Goldberg calls Biden the acting president on The View. Vice President Kamala Harris will appear on ABC Morning Talk Show Tuesday. The funny thing here is that Whoopi Goldberg, who doesn't know anything about politics, she's really very, very, extremely naive about what politics is, and she calls Joe Biden the acting president. You only say that when somebody is standing in. So is he the president? Is he the acting president? Is he standing in for somebody? She doesn't know, and she never walks anything back either. New York Post is reporting tatted up female Trendaragua gang member called the Barbie is busted for running brutal sex trafficking ring. So if you didn't hear about Trendaragua, it is a Venezuelan prison gang. It's not a street gang. It's a prison gang that was let out of prison and allowed to migrate to the United States, where it's present in over half a dozen cities right now. And here in New York, you have Trendaragua running a sex trafficking ring. Jerusalem Post is reporting son of Osama bin Laden deported from France, barring from returning. Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau signed an order banning Omar bin Laden from France, and that bin Laden had been previously deported. The whole purpose about this is they're going to resurrect Al-Qaeda. And they're going to bring this figure in. He's going to lead Al-Qaeda again, and we're going to have a rise of Islamic terrorism because the Democrats control Islamic terrorism. The AP is reporting don't expect human life expectancy to grow much more. Researchers say that's because human life expectancy is going down. And the reason for this is specifically certain virus, certain medical procedure, and it's going to get worse. And as well as you being poisoned on a daily basis by your food and water, that's not surprising. But I wanted to put that in there to show that they already, what they do is it's a little predictive programming. They plant the seed in your head, so when people start dying earlier, you're like, oh yeah, I read that AP article. It said, human life expectancy isn't going to grow much more, but it is growing. There is life extension technology, but you're not going to be able to access it. If you've ever seen Elysium, that's kind of the best analogy. Speaking of movies, New York Post is reporting Joker 2 moviegoers are leaving theaters mid-showing. What the fuck is this? Anytime you insert a musical or a musical number in a movie where it doesn't belong, so you could have, like in the previous Jokers, you had the Joker singing and dancing and that sort of thing. That's different. But here, Lady Gaga had several musical numbers where it just didn't fit in. What I hear, I didn't see the movie. But the reason this is good news is they were hoping to release this before an election to trigger the anarchists, because they did this the last go around when Trump was elected. They used movies to trigger people. Particularly with the Joker movie, it's a metaphor or analogy for anarchism. And so it triggers people that have nothing to lose to go out and create terror. It's a mimic. CBS News is reporting water supplier American Water Works says system was hacked. Most of the United States infrastructure has backdoors in it, and they are presently being exploited mostly by the Chinese communists, and they're already there. And if they haven't planted things, sleeper items in there, they will definitely have them in there soon enough. They could trigger them there at any time. Associated Press is reporting North Korea's Kim again threatens to use nuclear weapons against South Korea and the U.S. This is probably going to happen with an overall global war. So the shit's about to get real. BBC is reporting on a mission to cause mayhem. Russia's on a mission to cause mayhem on the UK streets, warns MI5. Now, MI5 is Military Intelligence 5, which is basically the FBI of Britain. But it's not Russia that's going to cause mayhem in the UK streets. It is more and more a chaotic situation in the UK caused by a changing in the social structure. They are less and less being concerned with native British citizens and Britain as a whole, and more concerned with Europe as a whole and following the dictates of the European banks. And undermining individual rights in the UK, much as they did in Australia and other places. But what is going there is coming here. You already see it in Canada. And that's the whole point of not re-electing Donald Trump, is because he is going to substantiate your individual constitutional rights. And in reality, that's what we need. We need to go back to the really what Christendom brought was the enshrining of the individual as being relatively good. And we should get back to that. It's called Christian humanism. It was way before secular humanism. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, share the podcast, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment. A little late start today. It was more like 10:15, so trying to keep it as short as possible. In any case, thanks for joining me. Don't forget you're under attack psychologically and biologically. And be careful of watching TV and watching the news. And this is why I created this program, is because we need to read the news, because you can parse out sentences and what they actually say more than when you hear people talking. So that's the whole basis of this. We want to read the news. I go live every day, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on Rumble or then abouts. Don't forget to check me out on social media, Getter, X, Facebook, Minds. Also check out my other website, libpop.org. Learn about libertarian populism. Thanks for joining me today. Stay hip to the trick. And I might see you tonight for Tuesdays with Perry. I have a dinner date I've got to go to, a dinner meeting I've got to go to. So we'll try to get a Tuesdays with Perry episode up tonight. If not, I'll see you tomorrow. Respect.
Are you implying here some kind of conspiracy?
You can't handle the truth.
Google me, bitch! Google me!
Rudy's Revelation